Hey guys, and welcome back to another Django tutorial. So in today's video, we're going to be going a bit more advanced with forms. I'll be showing you how to create your own custom forms that are a bit more dynamic than typical Django forms that we were using in the last video, using that forms class and whatnot. So yeah, I guess let's get into it. So the goal today kind of is to allow the user to add an item from their to-do list. So right now, we don't actually have any way for them to add items. We only have ways for them to add new to-do lists. So we're going to do that. We're also going to add some check buttons beside the to-do list items so we can show whether or not they are complete or incomplete without having to do this incomplete, complete kind of thing. So right off the bat, I'm actually just going to delete this incomplete and complete for now. And I'm going to start setting up a form inside of my HTML file here. Now, the reason we need a form is because we need to pass the information, like whether the user clicked a check button or whether they, what item, for example, they typed in to add to the list. We need to pass that back to our view using a post request. So we need a form to do that. So I'm going to start by creating a form. I'm going to say method equals, and in this case, post, and I'm going to say action, equals pound like this, okay? Or number sign, whatever you want to call it. Now I will simply close my form by doing that. And now I'm going to start by just setting up some buttons at the bottom of my form that say save and that say add item. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to have two buttons, save, add item. Save is going to save the changes to your checks, and add item is going to add the item that we will get from a text field that I'm also going to add. So the first button that I will create will be that save button. So to do that, I'm just going to say button, we'll say type equals, and in this case, wait, do we need type for a button? Yeah, we do. We'll say type equals submit. We'll say name equals, and in this case, it'll just be save. And I'll say value equals, and I can say save here as well. Now, when I close my button, I'll put whatever I want to display on it here. So in this case, I'm going to say save. And I'll copy this actually, and I'm going to just use the same thing, except instead of name, I'm going to say new item. I don't know why that tabbed there. And we'll give that value of new item as well. And obviously now I'm just going to make this add item. I mean, I could make it new item too. It doesn't really matter. And in between here, I'm going to add an input field, which is my text that you're going to type in for when you create a new button. So I'm going to say input. We'll say type equals text. And we'll say name equals, I guess we could say item. Why not? Item is probably not the best name, actually. Let's just say new. All right, new is probably not a good name either, but whatever, that's fine. Okay, so type equals text, name equals new, and sweet. Now what I'm gonna do now is add those check buttons in beside all of our items. So obviously if our item is complete, we want that check button to start off as checked. And if it's not, we want it to not be checked. So to do this, it's similar to the text. We're just gonna say input, we're gonna say type equals, and in this case, check box. We'll say value equals clicked, and you can call this whatever you want, but just remember this name because we're going to need to use this. And we're going to say name is equal to, and this is a little bit weird, but we're going to set the name equal to the ID of our item. So to do this, what I'm going to do is just go in here and say item.id, and before that I'm going to put a C. So that what we're going to do now is we're going to say all of our check buttons, because this is going to create a bunch of different check buttons, right? They're going to be given the name C and then whatever the ID of that button is. This will just make it way easier for us to determine which check button was checked and what item that corresponds to. And you'll see how we do that later. So let's copy this now. And I'm going to put it right here as well. So inside these li tags. Now the only difference is up here where it says is complete, if item.complete equals true, I'm just going to type checked like this, which will default it to start off checked. That's all that's going to do for us. Okay, so now we've actually set up this form. The last thing to add is our CSRF token that we always need to add whenever we create a token, or a form, sorry. So CSRF underscore token like that, and then hit save. So now that we've done that, our HTML will be showing up all nice. And now we just need to handle this from our view. So remember, our view is called index. So what I want to do in here now, very similar to create, is I want to first off start by checking whether or not we have posted something or we're getting something. So if we're posting something, we're going to say if, and then in this case, response dot post, or not post, sorry, dot method equals post like that. Then we will start doing all the stuff in terms of saving and adding items. Now I want to quickly go back here and talk about something for a second. So right now we have two buttons. We have save and we have new item. And these buttons might have different functions, and they do in this instance. So for example, save, well, we only want save to look at and update the check buttons, right? That's what it's going to do. It's just going to update your check buttons if you've completed an item or if you haven't completed it. Whereas our new item button or add item button is going to take the text from this text field and add it as a new item on our list. So we need a way to determine which button we clicked so we can determine what function we are going to perform. So to do this, what you can do actually is you can say if response dot post dot get, and then here you can put the name of your button. So in this case, I'm going to say, we'll start off by doing save like this. Okay. Now what this does actually is whenever you get a post request from the server, what's going to happen is all the information in this form here is going to be passed in what's known as a dictionary to our view. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a dictionary that looks something like this. So we'll have save, and it will either have no value or it will have a value of whatever we typed here as value. So for example, save, if we click this button, what's going to happen is it's going to be added to a dictionary, which is all of the information from this form, and it's going to be given this value only if we click it. So what's going to happen is we're going to get the name save points to the value save, and it's going to look like this precisely. Okay. We're also going to get all of the information for our check buttons. So what will happen is we'll get something like C1, which will be that ID, right? C1, and that'll point to, in here, it'll say, and I'll print this out after you so you guys can have a look at it. It'll say clicked if we clicked the check button. If we didn't click the check button, we're just going to get a blank string, or C1 might not even show up in the dictionary. Okay. So, and then we can also try, what do you call it? For example, like add item, we can do the same thing with add item. Now, the thing is, if we clicked add item, then it will come in and it will give the value of add item. Otherwise, it won't give us any value, just give us a blank string. And you guys will see how this works in a second. I'm going to print it out for you so you can have a look. So let's actually, if we are posting, let's print response dot post like that so you guys can have a look. Okay, so anyways, so we're going to see if we are saving. So if we're saving, then this will evaluate to true because there'll be some value, so that'll just work. Otherwise, we'll say, what do you call it? Elif response dot post and dot get. And in this case, instead of saying save, we're going to say new, I think. Was it new item? I keep forgetting what I call this. Yes, new item. Awesome. New item. Okay, so we'll just pass down here for now, and let's work inside of this first one up here. So what we want to do up here is we want to look at all the different check buttons and determine whether or not they were clicked or not, and then update our item accordingly. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all of the items in our current to-do list because we still have this value up here. And we're going to check the IDs of that with the check buttons and see if it was clicked or not. So to do this, I'm going to say for, I guess we'll say item in, and in this case, ls dot item underscore set dot all with lowercase l's. Okay, then what we will do is we'll say if, and in this case, response dot post dot get, and in here what we're going to do is we're going to say c plus str and then item.id. Now what this is doing is getting the item ID, converting it to a string, and adding a c to the beginning of it, so we will get the exact same kind of pattern of, what do you call it, names or IDs as we're setting up here, right? Because we have C in that item ID. That's just what we're doing here. So if we get that, and that is equal to the value of clicked, then what we need to do is, well, we need to update that item. So we'll say item.complete is equal to, and in this case, true. Now otherwise, so if we didn't get that or it wasn't equal to clicked, we'll take this, but we're going to set it equal to false. So this is the same as like if you unclick the check button and it doesn't, it's not check marked, then this will run right here, what I'm doing now. And then all we can simply do down here is just say, I guess actually inside the for loop, we'll say item.save, and there we are. Sweet, so that's how that works. And that's actually it for this saving the check buttons. Now what's left to do is to add a new item. This is, it's similar in terms of how we do this, but what we're going to start by doing is getting the text that was in that text input field here. So the name was new, so say text is equal to, and in this case response.post.get, and here we'll say new, And now what I'm going to do is, before I add this new item, because this will give us the text, I want to validate that this is valid input. Now you can do whatever checks you want on this input, and usually Django will do it for you, but since we're not using Django forms, using our own custom form, we don't have that option of using is valid like we used here. So what I'm going to do is just say if text, I guess we'll actually say len of text is greater than 2, so it's at least 3 characters, then I will simply add that item to the to-do list. So to do that, I'm going to say ls.item_set.create, and in this case we'll say text equals, and I'm actually going to have to rename this to txt here. We'll say txt, and then we will say complete equals false, like so. Otherwise, I'm just going to print out a message that just says like invalid input, just so that we can have a look at this in the console, and that should actually be about it. Now, I'd be surprised if I didn't make any mistakes, but let's give this a run. I already have the server, or actually I'm going to have to run the server again here. Run the server, so let's now attempt to go to like ID 2. So now we can see we have first item, second item, third item not showing. Now, if I decide to check an item or uncheck an item and hit save, what is your issue here? Name response. Oh, well, it would help if I spelled response correctly. Where did I misspell that? Of course, in the print statement. Anyways, let's see if this will update now. Python manage.py run server. Did I make another mistake? Let's see. 2. Okay, now let's try it. Save. There we go. So then you can see that the item saves. Now if I go to maybe, let's say, page 3, and I want to add an item, let's try hello, and we click add item, and now you can see that we get hello popping up, and I can check, I can save that, I can unsave it, and if I go back to 2, you can see that obviously the same checking pattern is still there. I could add a new item, so we'll just say new item here, add that, and you can see that it's popping up, and I can save that. So that is how you make a custom form. This is very useful, and what I've just shown you will allow you to do pretty well anything with forms, because now you know how to get information from forms. Now I will show you actually what our post requests are looking like, just so you can see, or sorry, what is it, requests, like what I'm printing here. I'll show you what that looks like and talk a little bit about that before we wrap up here. So you can see that, if I go here, we have check button C2, and that is given a value of clicked. We can see C5 is given a value of clicked, and C7 is given a value of clicked. So those IDs for our check buttons. We see that save is given the value of save because we hit that save button. But we see that we're not seeing any other values here, right? So if we don't click an item, or if we're not giving a value to it, we're not going to see it here. So for example, like, if we have C2 and we don't check that button, it's just simply not going to show up in the information that it passed to us, which means that we can check if it's not there and then do something accordingly. So the way that this get request works, when we say get like this, or this get method, is since this is kind of a dictionary, but this get method is specific to this type of data structure, and essentially if the item doesn't exist, I believe it just returns none, which means that if we ever put something like this, so for example, if save isn't there, we simply won't run the block, because if none, obviously it's not going to run. So that's the way that that kind of works. You can see, I mean, I would highly encourage you guys to kind of mess with this and do some requests, print them out, and see what it looks like. That's really the best way to understand how this works. You can see it's a type query dictionary, and when you try to get something, if it doesn't exist, it just says none. If it does exist, it'll give you the value that corresponds with it. And in some instances, you can actually have multiple values pointing to the same name. So that's just something to keep in mind that you guys might notice when you go through this. So anyways, that is essentially how that works. We've created a custom form. Now we know how to add things. And with this information, we can go into creating some more complex stuff. So in the next video, I think I'm going to be adding Bootstrap onto the website, making things look a little bit nicer, maybe adding a sidebar. We'll do some stuff like that. And then later on, we're going to get into user registration and all that kind of stuff so that you can actually have all of your to-do lists stored under a certain user. So anyways, that has been it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, please make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you in another video.